Hello everyone and welcome. It's Roommate and I'm here to do my timeless set review for Modern Horizons 3. I'm pretty excited to get over some of these cards because there are a lot of really sweet cards. So I'm going to go through them. I've broken them up into 5 categories, and so let's just get started. So the first one is going to be meta staples and meta breakers. And the cards I put in this section are cards that are going to define a new meta, cards that will sort of make the new meta. And I want to say the difference is, like, some of these cards are going to go into existing archetypes, and they're just going to be the best cards in those existing archetypes. And they're going to define the new meta in this new archetype. But some cards are going to make completely new decks, completely new archetypes for the meta. And then there are cards that are just going to be everywhere. They're not going to like define the meta. They're not going to, I have to beat this card, or I have to have a plan for this card or this deck. But they're just going to be all over the place. So this is sort of like the best cards of the set, almost. And yeah, so that's basically how to think of it, like sort of the best cards of the set. I'm going to try and time myself so I don't go too long on any one things. So to get started, we're going to start with the pitch elementals. These are obviously some of the most important cards from the new set. They're pretty easy because we know how powerful these cards are. Grief, Fury, Solitude, Endurance, I can never pronounce Subtlety. I always think it's Salmon something, but it's because it doesn't see that much play. These cards are absolutely broken, busted, format defining, meta defining, will be everywhere. I put them in the old border because I think the special guest cards can be kind of hard to look at and read. For the most part. So, these cards will be everywhere. They'll go into existing archetypes. They'll go into new archetypes. You'll have actual scam decks, whether it's red-black scam, like modern scam, or it's the blue-black almost legacy scam with reanimates and trolls. You're going to have beans pop off with Solitude and Fury. Endurance is just an ultra sideboard staple, is just 0 mana graveyard interaction. Like, these cards are going to be everywhere. They're pretty broken. And my 2 cents, I really don't like the design of these cards. I think they really should have been cast triggers, not just ETB triggers. So we're going to see Ephemerate, the like Malakir Reverse, those effects on cards. You're going to see Reanimate and Beans, and these cards are going to gain popularity in the meta solely because of the pitch elementals. So these cards are absolutely busted. Next, we're going to have the Flare cycle. Each of these has sort of the same text where you have to sacrifice, or they have a mana cost, and then sacrifice a non-token creature of the same color to pay it for free. The blue one counters target spells, the green one cultivates, the black one's edict, the white one, your life total can't change, and permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And then the red one lets you fork, so copy target instant and sorcery. You may choose new targets for that copy. These cards I would describe as they're going to see play. The blue one especially, I think the blue one's the best one. Just a 0 mana counter spell is really good. So I think all of these cards are going to see play. They're going to have a spot in the meta. The black one's also really cool with like grief, so you can like grief, then sacrifice your grief to the flare. So the other ones I feel are much more niche but they're still free spells. Flare of Cultivation with a Boreal Grazer, for example, is just so much mana on turn 2. So I like these cards. I think they won't be meta definers. I think they'll mostly be like ultra staples, and you'll see them all the time, but you're not going to need to have a plan to beat these cards. They'll just be good cards. Next card is going to be Ugin's Labyrinth. This is a really exciting card because it's a soul land. Soul land is a land that taps for 2 mana. And so it's a land that you get to imprint a colorless card with mana value 7 or greater from your hand. And there's going to be different cards that can do that. Like, you can play like artifacts that do it, or you can play Eldrazi that do it. It's kind of the 2 options. But either way, it's just going to be a land that you are going to consistently tap for 2 mana. And then in the super late game, you actually get to tap it and get the imprinted card back to your hand. So if you need that extra card, it's not card disadvantage anymore. So why I like this card a bunch is it finally lets you turn 1 Chalice of the Void without needing to play a Dark Ritual. That is super, super, super important. The turn 1 Dark Ritual Chalice decks always had this tension of, oh, I have to play a 1 mana spell to get this Chalice online. Well, now you get lands to get a turn 1 Chalice on 1. That is super strong. And this also just lets you ramp into cards like the One Ring or Karn. There might even be like Blood Moon decks that want to play it to just power out a turn 2 Blood Moon consistently. Lands that tap for 2 mana are just broken, and I think this card will make new decks and new archetypes. I expect this card to see a ton of play. The next card, this is part of a cycle, but I don't think the rest of the cycle is as good as Shifting Woodlands. So it's a land, taps for green, enters battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. So these all have the castle unless you control a land with the type of the same color. They enter tapped. So it's an untapped land. And what's really broken about this card is Delirium, 2 and 2 green. So it can pay for itself. It becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. This card is so strong. It lets you copy things like Omniscience or Gristlebrand from your graveyard. So counter spells, yeah, good luck beating Shifting Woodlands, getting Omniscience into play. This card, I don't think it's going to redefine the meta, but I think it will be like all over the place. It lets you basically reanimate stuff or bring stuff from your graveyard without having to cast spells. So making counter spells worse while making those decks stronger. I think Show and Tell will find a home for this. Discarding the Omniscience, discarding a Gristlebrand, which not all the decks play Gristlebrand, but they might with Shifting Woodlands, and just having this ultra consistent kill condition that's very hard to interact with to get your Omniscience into play. So this card's really, really strong. I expect it to be all over the place and force answers a lot of ways, whether it's a Pithing Needle or just even more graveyard interaction than already sees play. Like, this card's going to need a lot of answers to be beaten. So it's going to define like how you build sideboards. Next card, Harbinger of the Seas. So this is color shifted Magus of the Moon. It is a 1/2 blue Merfolk Wizard. Non-basic lands are islands. Blood Moon's a very good card in this format. It has some bad matchups. This card's really, really strong. It does the same thing. Islands, I would say on average, are worse to give your opponents because there are a lot of decks that are just playing like a lot of mountains, or can use red mana a lot. So having islands, that's a bonus. And then like I've been playing a or I guess is it Splash Green Rhinos deck with Blood Moons in the sideboard. Well, this card might just replace Blood Moons because islands are more important for that deck. So this might change like Blue Moon type archetypes into just not needing to play Blood Moon. They can be playing Harbinger of the Seeds. So Blood Moon is a format defining card. You have to have answers to Blood Moon. This card is very, very good. It will be similar to Blood Moon in that you have to have answers to it. They're going to be different answers because artifact and or not artifact, but enchantment destructions doesn't work on this card, but creature removal does. So this card will see a lot of play. It's going to affect the format the same way as Blood Moon affects the format. So very, very strong. Different change of pace. And maybe that buff for Blue Moon archetypes into just not needing to play Moon and just being on Harbinger of Seas. So this card's going to see a lot of play. I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm sorry, but Chthonian Nightmare. I think this card's really, really strong in that it's a 2-mana recurring nightmare, especially in a Lyris format. So when it enters battlefield, you get 3 energy. Then you get to pay X energy, sacrifice a creature, return Chthonian Nightmare and a creature with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield. And so what this basically does is you play it, you pay energy, you sacrifice a creature, you bring a creature back, this comes back to your hand, you play it again, you get more energy, and you just get a loop through your graveyard, basically, and a bunch of creatures. And there are a bunch of really strong creatures that cost a very little amount. Orcish Bowmaster, Sitch Supplier, Blood Gas are awesome enablers because they either fill your graveyard or leave extra creatures behind. Like Blood Gas, you're like, oh, play a land, get a Blood Gas, sack the Blood Gas, get something back. It was a fetch land, sack the fetch land, get another thing back while I'm generating energy. So I think this has a chance to make its own sacrifice archetype. I think it's that strong of a card. Recurring Nightmare is a really powerful card. And then you have cards like the new Grist, which I'll talk about more in its own slide. But I think that this card could make an entirely new graveyard deck. And I think it's really, really strong. And I think having, Pithing Needles, Graveyard Interaction, stuff like that, just to shut this card down, will need some to be played. And then I think the 2 best flip blockers, and I think it's by a lot. So you have a Johnny, which is a 2-mana 1/2 that comes with a 2/1, and then whenever one or more other cats you control dies, you exile it transformed into a 3 loyalty planeswalker, which has +2, put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. Not that good. 0, however, makes a 2/1 cat warrior token, and then if you control a red permanent other than a Johnny, you get to deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target. That's super strong. And then -4, each opponent chooses an artifact, a creature, enchantment, and a planeswalker from among non-land permanents they control and sacrifices the rest. So Cataclysm, but without getting rid of lands. So this card's really, really good. It's a 2-mana, 2-for-1, like 2 bot, basically a 2-mana 3/3. Kind of think of it like that. And it flips into a planeswalker that makes 2/1s every turn as a 0, and sometimes you're just going to be able to use it as a removal spell. Like, it's really, really good. It's like a really strong, really resilient 2-drop. I think it's pretty good. We'll see plenty of play. And then there's Tameo, which 1 mana 0/3 flying. When it attacks, you investigate, and then when you draw your 3rd card in a turn, you flip it, basically. Flips into +2 until your end of next turn. When a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets -1, -0 until end of turn. -3, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a green card, add 1 mana. -7, Draw cards equal to number of half the cards in your library rounded up. You get an emblem, no maximum hand size. Why I think this is in the meta staples is because of Brainstorm. So Brainstorm is just turn 1 Tameo, turn 2 Brainstorm. I have a Planeswalker on turn 2. Answer it. It pluses up to 4, so it has a bunch of loyalty. And then I don't think the -7 will see too much action. Obviously, if you ever use it, you're going to win. But that -3, buying back the Brainstorm you cast, or buying back a Swords Plowshares, or a mana, it's strong. So simply because Brainstorm is in this format, I'm very high on Tameo. And yeah, that's it. It just this okay 1-drop 0/3 that flips into a okay Planeswalker. It is strong. It's basically almost like a 2-mana Planeswalker in the format. So I like this card a lot. I think it will see play, and I think that it will be a good option for control decks. And so those are the what I think the best cards are. So the next section is archetype makers, and these cards might not make a new meta, but they'll make new decks, or they'll support new decks, or they'll have potential to make new decks. So I don't think these are going to define the format like the cards before have the possibility to, or I know will. I think these cards will mostly be, you can play this deck and it will be a viable option. So it's almost like the brewing section, in that these are going to be some cool new archetypes to play in Timeless. The rest of the flip walkers, I think these cards are noticeably worse. There's so much text on these cards. Grist, when it or another creature enters battlefield from your graveyard, you have to pay a mana. If you do, you flip it. It's a 3 loyalty Planeswalker that +1, make an insect, and then mill 2. If a black card was milled, the insect gets a death touch counter. -2, destroy target artifact or enchantment. -6 for each creature card in your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black-green insect. This card's pretty good. There's Reanimate, there's Chthonian Nightmare, there's Unearth, there's Luris. So there's a Bloodghast. So there's a bunch of ways to actually trigger this. So it might be better than I think. I just don't think the flip side is that strong. Like a 1/1, making 1/1 tokens every turn's okay, but destroying an artifact or enchantment isn't the best. So I think this card's going to see play. I think it will be in some new decks, but I don't think it will be a format-defining card. Realm Monsoon Mange. Instants and sorceries cast 1 less it costs. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 1 damage. If you win the flip, you can transform it. It enters the battlefield with additional loyalty counters for each instant or sorcery you've cast this turn. +1, instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. -2, deals 2 damage, divided among up to 2 targets. Draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral. -8, exile top 8 cards in the library. You may cast instant or sorcery spells from among them without paying their mana cost. This is a Storm card in other formats, but Storm in Timeless, it's sort of a different deck. It's playing Dark Ritual, and Ral does nothing with Dark Ritual. So in the future, if they add some rituals that work with Ral, this card will see play. But right now, there's just better Storm archetypes than Ral. So I don't see it doing anything right now. It could in the future. And then there's Sorin, House Markov. It's a 2-mana 1/4 lifelink extort. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, flip it. It has extort, +2, create a food token, -1, it deals damage equal to the amount of life you gain this turn to any target. -6, gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire and its other types. Put a lifelink counter on it. If you control a white permanent other than Sorin, gaining, it's like gaining 3 life is like, it's not super hard to do, but it's also not like super easy to do. And then when you flip it, I don't think the juice is worth this squeeze. +2 to make a food token, and then you have to sacrifice the food tokens to get damage off the -1s. So, and you have to ++ to be able to ultimate to gain control of target creature. So I don't really think this card has a home. If they print like a accidental life gain card and you can just like turn 2 like Sorin, gain 3 life, flip it, then I think this card's going to be pretty strong. But like a turn 3, a planeswalker that makes a food, or shoot something for 3, I think this card has potential, but I think it's the worst of the bunch. I think him and Ral are definitely like the 2 worst and don't really have a home right now, but could have a home in the future. That was a long time on those 2 cards, but there's a lot of text on them. This page is kind of a mess, which is fine. This is like energy cards in general. I think there might be an energy deck. I'm not sure, but I think there are some like really strong energy payoffs from the new set. My 2 favorite, Amped Raptor. This card's like probably gonna be like a 2-mana Bloodbraid Elf, which is like crazy strong. So I think this card will see play. It is a 2/1, so it dies to Bowmaster. It is a Bowmaster format, but I think the ability to just like play one of your 1-drops that make it extra energy into an Amped Raptor to hit like, to have it hit like basically every spell in your deck is going to be pretty good. And Amped Raptor might even see play outside of energy decks as a weighted get Crashing Footfalls. So you can play Mystic Sanctuary or Brainstorm into Amped Raptor to hit a Crashing Footfalls. So it might even see play doing that. So I think Amped Raptor is really good. The second card I really, really like is Wrath of the Skies. So this is X, double white. You get X energy, then you may pay any amount of energy, destroy each artifact, creature, enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the energy paid this way. So obviously at face value, 3 mana, make an energy, pay the energy, destroy everything 1 or less. However, if you have some energy payoffs, this can be 2 mana, pay energy you already have, wrath the board. So, 2 mana wrath effect, crazy good. Like, crazy good. So, I think those are the 2 best cards, and I actually think, like, Wrath of the Skies could be its, you're playing that with a couple energy cards, and then it's like, oh, I just have this 2 mana Wrath. So, those 2 cards, I think, are probably the 2 best. Well, I see value in all these other ones. Tune with the Narrative is just a cantripping enabler. It's very similar to a Tune with Ether. Galvanic Discharge, removal spell. If you get rid of a 1-drop, it's probably going to make you 2 energy for your Amped Raptor or your Wrath of the Skies. So just a removal spell enabler. So that's pretty good. Voltaic Stormdrake, it's kind of the energy Gilded Drake. Maybe a sideboard card. I don't know if it has a home, but it's not a bad card by any means. But I don't know where you would play it. Solar Transformer, it's a 2-drop mana rock that makes you energy. So if you're playing like a control deck, it might be decent. I don't know. Unstable Amulet, this card's really good. Enters the battlefield, 2 energy when you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand. Deals 1 damage to each opponent. Tap it, pay 2 energy, exile the top card of the library. You may play that card until you exile another card with Unstable Amulet. So think of it as draw a card, if you're never going to use the card, you can just draw another card. However, if you're in an energy deck, this might just be like a 2 mana like draw card, like engine. So I like this card a lot. I don't if there is an energy deck, I don't think a Wrath of Skies energy deck, but an Ant Raptor Galvanic Discharge energy deck. This can be your card draw engine that doesn't lose to Bowmasters. So I like this card. I think it's pretty good. Static Prism, it's just like a 1 mana interaction. So this card might see play outside of energy decks. It's just a 1 mana banishing light that stays around for 2 turns, which is pretty good if you're like a Hammer Time deck or something like that, and you just like, yeah, I don't want Swords to Plowshares. I don't need to like exile it forever. I just need to exile it for 2 turns and you're dead. So I think Static Prism might see play outside of energy. I think it is like just so mana efficient for being a banishing light. I like it a lot. Jolted Awake, again, it's just another energy enabler. I don't think this one will see that much play. And same with Phyrexian Ironworks. It's just an energy payoff. It's not a great one. It's 3 mana to make 3/3s, but it could see play in an energy deck. But I think energy might make it as a deck. I'm not sure. It's either going to be an Ant Raptor or Unstable Amulet deck, or it's going to be a Wrath of the Skies sort of controlling deck. Somewhere in there. But I think it's pretty good. Toxic Deluge. This is a 3 mana Wrath, and Black doesn't have like great Wraths at the moment. It's like Path of Peril, which Path of Peril might still see some play. If you're playing like a bunch of 3-drops, Path of Peril might be like really, really good still, because it like kills everything from Zoo, but it can keep your 3-drops around. However, I think Toxic Deluge, like 99% of the play, if you want a Black Wrath effect, this will be your Black Wrath effect. So it's 3 mana, pay X life, all creatures get -X, gets around indestructible, and it's just like a super strong card. Sees tons of play, really good in Death Shadow decks. Like, this card's going to be seeing a lot of play, but I don't think it's going to like define the meta or anything. It's just going to be your best Black Wrath option. These might be like 2 of my favorite cards in the new set, for personal reasons. And that's because I was an Elvish Reclaimer person. I tried really hard to make Elvish Reclaimer feel the dead like Golgari decks work. They did not work. This was a while ago. They were too slow. They didn't have enough ramp. And now we get Rite of the Reliquary. And this card is like perfect for that deck. Because 2 mana, 2/2 Vigilance. And it gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Has tap, sacrifice another creature, basically go get any land and put it on the battlefield tapped. That is exactly what this deck needs. You're sacrificing a Bloodghast or a Kami, Kami, and then you can ramp yourself, which is the problem with Elvish Reclaimer. Was, it was like really strong, like tutoring lands, getting really big, but it didn't get you ahead on your land drops. Right gets you ahead on your land drops. It gets you up to Field of the Dead. So I will be playing this card. I will be trying to make this deck work where I'm like a Golgari mid-range lands control deck. And I think 6 is an interesting card for that deck. 3 mana, 2/4 reach. When it attacks, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them into your hand. So kind of a card draw effect, especially if you're a Field of the Dead deck. And then as long as it's your turn, non-impermanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. That is really, really strong. So you can buy back, you can discard a land, and then cast permanents from your graveyard. So cast your Reclaimers, cast your Rite of the Reliquary. So I think this card's really, really strong, really high upside. And with Rite, instead of being like a Reclaimer deck with Luris, you might want to be a Tybar deck. Tyvar, get back a right, and immediately be able to activate its ability. So if I'm playing Tyvar, like 1 or 2 sixes could be really, really strong for that deck. So I'm really looking forward to trying this deck. Will it be good? Probably not, but I want to play Golgari lands mid-range control. I'm excited for these 2 cards. So here's the rest of the new castle cycle, and the thing about the original castles is all of them saw play somewhere. Obviously, some are better than the others, but all of them see play somewhere. And I think these are like all have a chance to see play. I think Monumental Stone Row as sort of like a draw a card. It's a 4-mana tap it, look at the top 5 of your library. You put a historic card from among them into your hand. Not like super high upside, but still like a decent enough card. And that I like quite a bit. It might see some play as just like a land that draws you a card here and there. Arena of Glory, I think there are going to be some high upsides with this card. We're giving like the right creature haste, or going, turn 1 Blood Crypt, Thoughtseize, turn 2 Arena of Glory, play Ragavan, exert it, play Ragavan, and another 1 drop, and then you get to attack for a bunch, immediately get the Ragavan trigger, and your Ragavan stays in play to save you more mana. So I can see this card seeing some play. Exerting it is tough, but it's a pretty good card. Arch of Innovation, I think this card's either going to be like really busted and people are going to hate it, or it's not going to be good enough. I don't know where it is, because it gives the next spell you improvise. So it really, like, you want to be flooding the board with, clue tokens or blood tokens or map tokens, and using that to cheat out spells. So that would have to be a new archetype that we haven't seen anymore, but it could do powerful things. And then there's Spymaster's Vault. I think this is the worst one. Conniving in a Bowmaster's format, pretty rough. Also, it connives where that's the number of creatures that died this turn. And it doesn't work with Wrath. Like, it wants the board to be Wrath, but then you can't actually activate it if the board is Wrath. So it's like this weird spot where it's like you want to play this in a sacrifice-y deck to maybe get the connive value. Like, you sacrifice a bunch of stuff, you connive onto one thing, get it really big. But it's like best against Wraths, but it's useless against the Wrath. So I'm not super high on this card. Conniving in a Bowmaster world, and then like having this awkward counterplay where you want a bunch of creatures to die, but you still need a creature to activate. So not super high on it, but it could see some play. So this slide has 2 cards, and I think these will see play as beaters. Psychic Frog, 2 mana, 1/2. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, draw a card. It's pretty good. Discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's pretty good. And then exile 3 cards from your graveyard. It gains flying until end of turn. So this has evasion, it's a discard outlet, and can draw cards. That's really, really strong. 2 mana 1/2s that draw cards should be weak to Bowmaster, but the +1/+1 counters don't make it super weak to Bowmaster. And the flying can make it get over Bowmaster, so say, for lethal. So I think this card will see some play as like a pretty decent beater in blue-black decks. I don't know like how high the ceiling is, but it's still a pretty decent card, and I think it will see some play. Nethergoyf, I think this actually takes over as the best 1-drop black creature over Stalactite Stalker. It's a 1 mana, power and toughness is equal to the number of card types among cards in only your graveyard. And that really limits it. So you need to go like fetch into Bauble, into Nethergoyf, and you only have a 2/3 that dies to a bolt. But still, a 1 mana 2/3 is strong. So I think this card might see more play than Stalactite Soccer, which is a playable card in Timeless. It's not the best card, and I think Nethergoyf will be on that level of Stalactite Stalker. The Escape, you do have to exile types among your cards, which kind of stinks, but this card will see some play as like, oh, I just need a black 1-drop beater. So we'll see some play, won't be meta defining or all over the place. But both of these cards I think are playable and you will see them, but you won't see them like everywhere. I want to preface this in I like the idea of special guest, but I hate the execution of special guest like this. These two cards are not mythics, and we saw this with Victimize. Victimize was a mythic special guest, and it's an uncommon in Modern Horizons 3. And it's like so predatory. Like, oh, these are going to be playable cards in the format, pretty good ones too. And yeah, they're uncommon level cards, but you have to spend mythic wild cards on them. And that is the part of special guests I really dislike. Like them adding mythic level cards like Show and Tell or the Pitch Elementals. Like, that's fine. Those are mythic level cards. They're really, or Stoneforge Mystic too. Like, these are mythic level cards. Like, I understand them, like, they would be mythics in the regular set. But Dismember and Prismatic Endings being mythics, I think that feels so wrong. Because these two cards, off my ranting, these two cards are both good. They're both totally playable removal spells. Dismember helps off-color decks have access to removal. So mono blue decks can have a playable removal spell. It's not great, but it's playable. And I've been trying Simic decks, and one of the problems is like they don't have a good removal spell. Dismember, it's playable in a Simic deck. It's not a great removal spell, but it's 1 mana kill something. So it's a playable card. You will see it be played, but it's not like crazy. Prismatic Ending, I like the card. I think it's good. Just, 1 mana, get rid of a 1-drop. 2 mana, get rid of a 2-drop. 3 mana, get rid of, like, it's never mana, it's almost never mana positive. I guess against Chalice it's mana positive, but it's very rarely mana positive, but it's super consistent. I've been playing March of Otherworldly Light in a lot of decks. Prismatic Ending's probably going to replace every single of the White March because that card's not that good. This card is a much better version of this card of March. So both these cards are playable. We'll see play. It stinks that they're mythics, so they might not see as much play as they should because you can get away with non-mythic cards. Winter Moon. I talked about the new Blood Moon, the Merfolk in the meta definers. I don't think Winter Moon's is good, but I do think it will see some sort of play. Specifically in aggro decks, it's sort of like, think of it as like a finisher, where you're like, oh, I'm a burn player, and I get you down to, 6 life, and I have a couple creatures and a couple cards in hands. Well, I'm going to play Winter Moon. Basically, you're only going to have 2 mana next turn, like, good luck killing me with 2 mana. That's where I think Winter Moon's going to see play. This format is super mana efficient, though, so I think it will see, some play, but not, tons of play. So it's a good card, not a great card. And with Harvester of the Seas, with Winter Moon, play your basics. Try to make sure you have at least 1 basic to make sure you can still cast spells through these effects. But so cards playable, not great. We're also getting 2 more reanimate effects. Quest for Necropolis and Persist. These cards are fine. We have actual reanimate, and I think Quest for Necropolis might see a little bit more play in the like, oh, I'm reanimating a Troxa or Gristlebrand. Like those type of decks, like Persist is useless. So you go to Quest, and if you play like turn 1 Quest, turn 2 Fetch, turn 3 Fetch, it's a 2-mana reanimate. So it's not like a terrible card. I don't think it will see a ton of play. Persist is only non-legendary creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card might see a play in other style decks. So I've been playing a lot of Vaultborn Tyrant. It's really good with Vaultborn Tyrant. This is playable with the Trolls or with the Pitch Elementals. So they're two different cards. They both give redundancy in different styles of decks. So they will see play. You won't see them everywhere. And I think both will kind of see play in different style of decks, but yeah, they're both totally reasonable cards that will see play. These are sort of the red-green Eldrazi beaters. Eldrazi has this problem where with Ugin's Labyrinth, these cards are really good. Without it, these cards are unplayable. So Modern has Eldrazi Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth, so you're going to have these soul lands to cast them. Timeless, you're not going to have them nearly as often, so I don't expect to see these in a lot of places. You do get like the Lighted Halfling to help you spend the colorless mana. But if there's like a red-green Eldrazi beatdown deck, these cards are going to be like played in that deck. But I don't think that deck's going to be anywhere. Maybe in the future we'll get enough broken mana for Eldrazi specifically that we start to see Eldrazi beatdown cards.